Welcome back to Finding the Truth series. In this series, I talk about a step-by-step guide on how to find the truth of our existence. This is part 4 of the series, and in this part, I will be talking to you guys about the supporting arguments for theism. Just to recap, in our previous episode, we answered the question, where did everything come from? And we came to the conclusion, through our observations, that an independent, unchanging first cause is needed for dependent, changing existences to exist, and for the present to occur. The term independent, unchanging first cause is quite a mouthful, so before we continue on with our discussion about what this independent, unchanging first cause is and how to understand this phenomenon, we should try to make this more simpler so that we could refer to it more easily, because it is quite a mouthful. Let us use the term God, because people around the world tend to use the word God to describe something that is similar. Although we're not going to specify a specific God, but just use the term God, as that is the common term used in society. So we're going to say that God means independent, unchanging first cause. If anything is not independent, unchanging, or the first cause, then that thing is not God. Okay, so it's just a definition or a term that we're creating to make things more simpler for us. Also, let us use the pronouns it or he/him for simplicity. We're not going to be specifying a specific gender. It's rather just another way for simplifying matters when we're referring to the independent, unchanging first cause. Now, to the atheist that might think that this is God of the gaps fallacy, it is actually not, because we came to the conclusion that an independent, unchanging first cause must exist through logical deduction, and this is merely a terming or a defining. It is not something that we're specifying in terms of who God is or which God we're referring to in terms of various religions, but rather we're just terming it. We're saying that God is defined as such, just so that we can simplify our discussion and our conversation. Now, there are many arguments that support our previous conclusion in our previous episode. These include the teleological argument, the ontological argument, the cosmological argument, the fine-tuning argument, and the argument from consciousness. Now, we won't touch upon the ontological argument and the cosmological argument because our main argument from the previous episode was actually a combination of both of these. And so we will speak about the other three. First, we have the teleological argument, which is also called the design argument. It goes as such. Say you find a car in the middle of the desert. If you see this car, you would know, or you would think, that someone must have created it. It can't just come about without any sort of intervention. Someone must have definitely made all the parts, because it has intentionality, it has function, it has sophistication and complexity. And this is what any sane person would conclude. This is similar to when people try to understand reality. They see all the complexity and they come to the conclusion that there must be someone or something that created all of that which we see. And then we have the fine-tuning argument. The fine-tuning argument is similar to the design argument. Basically, the fine-tuning argument says that many of the initial conditions and the free parameters of a universe need to be finely tuned in order for the development of life in that universe to be possible. The universe is indeed fine-tuned for life, and as such, a supernatural designer of immense power and knowledge must exist. Let me give you guys an example. So, there are many constants in the universe that allow for life to exist. For example, we have the constant g, which is the Newtonian gravitational constant. The fine-tuning argument states that if this constant was different, even by 1 decimal point, we wouldn't be able to sustain life in this universe. If this was 1 point up, then everything would clump together and life would not be formed. And if this was 1 point down, then everything would expand further and life would not be able to come together, or molecules would not be able to come together to create life. So there are many other constants that have the same effect. If these were changed in any small, minute way, then life would not be able to exist. As such, this argument basically states that the conditions for life are so minute and so specific that it erases all chances of it being just random, and it must have intentionality and some sort of designing that took place. And so it points towards an intellect, an intellectual, intentional causation. Next, we have the argument from consciousness. This argument states that if there's something that lacks consciousness, and it lacks the potential for consciousness, then it cannot be conscious, nor can consciousness emerge in it. But it does. And how is that? Let me give you guys an analogy. Say, for example, we have a bunch of molecules. None of these molecules actually have any consciousness. They can't think for themselves. They can't experience themselves. However, if these molecules came together and created this brain, is it possible for this brain to start having consciousness? Well, apparently it does, because I'm here talking to you guys and you guys are listening along and you guys are asking those existential questions in life. But how did that even happen when the primary molecules that make up the brain don't have consciousness in the first place? And this is the argument from consciousness. It implies that there must have been an initial consciousness that allowed for consciousness to arise in other parts of the universe, or other creations in the universe. Next, we have a bonus argument, which I did not include in my list earlier. And this argument, I like to call it the argument from experience. The argument is quite long, and I will let you guys read through it yourselves. But just to summarize, it basically states that our experiences is what we go by. And we can't really rationalize or think of anything outside of our experiences. Let me give you an example. Say I ask you, think of a color outside of the visible color spectrum. Would you be able to do so? Well, you wouldn't, because we can't go beyond what we've experienced in our lives. As such, it's impossible for us to actually conceive of things that don't actually exist in our experiences. And yet we do actually conceive of things that don't exist in our experiences, such as the soul. We don't experience it, at least not in the physical world. But in the metaphysical world, people do have this concept of the soul, and it is actually seen throughout human society and every parts of the globe. As such, if we experience something that is metaphysical or beyond the natural world, things such as the soul or consciousness or God. So we conclude, for design, fine-tuning, consciousness to exist, there must be a designer, fine-tuner, and an intelligent agency. There can't be an infinite regress of these things, or we wouldn't experience them in the present. I hope this makes sense, and I hope these arguments are enough for you to conclude what I've concluded here. And I'll see you next time in our next video. Thank you guys for watching.